The day I moved into my new house, a woman in a pastel tracksuit and wedge sandals was already standing on my lawn with a clipboard. She looked like someone who only left the house to complain about the weather, or someone else's fence. I hadn't even finished backing the U-Haul into the driveway when she marched over like she owned the street. "You must be Walter Zane," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice drywall. "I'm Cheryl, Vice President of the Maple Ridge HOA. I gave her a nod, pulling the parking brake. "Nice to meet you, Cheryl, but I'm not joining the HOA. Her jaw dropped like I'd cursed her poodle. "I'm sorry, what?" I bought the house directly from the original owner, never signed any HOA paperwork. I checked with my lawyer before closing. This property was annexed before the HOA was formed. "I'm not legally obligated to join." Her eyes narrowed, like she was trying to laser beam me into submission. "That's not how we do things here, Mr. Zane. Everyone on this street is part of the HOA." "Not me," I said, heading toward the back of the truck. "I like my freedom too much." Cheryl puffed up like a balloon about to pop, muttering something about setting a precedent and community standards. I ignored her. I was too busy unloading tools and trying to find my coffee maker. That night, someone knocked on my door. It was Cheryl again, this time with a thick folder and a forced grin. "We've drafted your welcome packet. It outlines monthly dues, lawn regulations, and approved paint colors. Signature goes here," she said, tapping the last page. I leaned against the door frame. "Cheryl, I told you. I'm not joining. I don't owe dues, I don't need paint approval, and I sure as hell don't want a newsletter." Her smile vanished. "If you refuse to cooperate, I'll have you evicted." I laughed. "You can't evict someone who owns their home outright." "That's not how this works." She leaned in, whispering like it was a threat. "We'll see about that." The next morning, I woke up to a violation notice duct taped to my truck. "Unauthorized vehicle on front lawn." The truck was clearly in my driveway. The day after that, I got 3 more. One for non-conforming house numbers, one for improper trash bin storage, and another for failure to display HOA welcome flag. That flag never existed. I started documenting everything. Photos, timestamps, even security cam footage from the doorbell camera. Cheryl was having neighbors, her HOA cronies, walk by and snap pictures of my yard like they were the paparazzi of petty. Then came the certified letter. It claimed I owed over $2,000 in fines and warned that the HOA would place a lien on my home if I didn't remedy the situation. I took it straight to my lawyer. "You're not part of the HOA, they have no legal standing over you," he said, flipping through the papers. "But if they try to enforce any of this, it's harassment. Document everything, every call, every letter, every fake fine." Oh, I was already on it. That weekend, Cheryl and her board held a mandatory neighborhood meeting. I didn't go. I spent the evening installing 2 more security cameras, one at the front gate and one facing the street. By Monday, I caught one of her board members trying to toss a bag of leaves onto my lawn at midnight. Poor guy didn't realize he was being recorded in full HD. I uploaded the footage to a private folder and named it HOA Clowns. By the end of the week, Cheryl showed up again, this time with a new threat. "You don't want this to get ugly, Walter. If you won't play by our rules, we'll make it very difficult for you to live here." I gave her the same deadpan look I gave my boss when he tried to schedule a meeting during football season. "Good luck with that, Cheryl." On Tuesday morning, I came outside to find my mailbox lying in pieces across the curb. The post was snapped clean in half, like someone had taken a crowbar to it. Nothing else on the street was touched. I stood there staring at it, then slowly turned toward the security camera mounted on the edge of my garage. Back inside, I pulled up the footage. At exactly 2:13 a.m., a figure in a hoodie crept up with a tire iron, gave the post 3 hard swings, then jogged back into the shadows. The person wore gloves, but I recognized the walk. It was the same guy who'd thrown leaves on my lawn, Craig, Cheryl's lapdog from the HOA board. I didn't bother calling Cheryl. I went straight to the police. The officer assigned to my case, Detective Ramirez, took one look at the footage and raised an eyebrow. "You got any problems with this guy recently?" "Yeah," I said. "His HOA's been trying to strong-arm me since the day I moved in." "Sounds like harassment to me," he said, scribbling in his notebook. "You got that lawyer still?" "Absolutely." "Good, keep him close. We'll pull this guy in for questioning, get a statement. If the HOA's behind this, we'll pursue charges." The next day, Cheryl parked her Lexus across my driveway and started pacing back and forth in front of my yard like she was performing a one-woman protest. She was on the phone, talking loud enough for me to hear every word through the window. "I don't care what the police say, he's a threat to this community. He's filming people without consent. That's surveillance. He's violating privacy laws." Nice try, Cheryl. Unfortunately for her, every camera was pointed at my own property or public areas, and I had the legal paperwork to back it up. I went outside, leaned against the porch column, and waited for her to notice me. She didn't stop talking. "I don't care how we have to do it. If the Leon doesn't scare him, we'll find something else. Code enforcement, zoning violations, anything." She finally turned and saw me watching. Her voice didn't even waver. "Oh, he's right here," she said into the phone, standing there like a vulture. I gave her a little wave. "How's Craig doing?" I asked. She ended the call without a word and stormed off. The next morning, her Lexus was keyed from bumper to bumper. I didn't touch it, but I knew she'd try to blame me. Sure enough, 2 hours later, a patrol car pulled up. Officer Kramer stepped out, looking uncomfortable before he even reached the porch. "She says you vandalized her car." "Did she mention the dozen cameras pointed at my driveway?" I asked. He sighed. "I figured." "Mind if I take a look at the footage?" I invited him in, pulled up the timestamp, and played it back. Cheryl's car sat untouched all night. Nobody came near it. She must have done it herself or had someone else do it to set me up. Officer Kramer watched in silence, then shook his head. "That's a false report. I'll file it." She was getting desperate. 2 days later, I came home from work to find that someone had spray painted the word trash across my garage door in red paint. Again, only my house was hit. The cameras caught it all. This time it was another board member, Linda, the same woman who'd once tried to measure my grass with a ruler. I handed the footage over to Detective Ramirez. He looked exhausted. "They're not even trying to be subtle," he muttered. "This isn't just harassment anymore, it's coordinated vandalism." "I'm bringing this to the DA. At this point, my lawyer, Dean, decided it was time to do more than just react. "We're filing a civil suit," he said. "Harassment, property damage, defamation, and attempted fraud. And we're subpoenaing the HOA's internal communications." He submitted the paperwork the following Monday. That's when things really blew up. A week after the suit was filed, someone from inside the HOA leaked their internal emails. I didn't ask who it was, but I had a good guess. There was an older couple on the board who'd always looked uncomfortable during the public meetings. One of them must have had enough. The emails revealed everything. Cheryl had been orchestrating the campaign against me from the start. She referred to me as the rogue element and outlined plans to pressure him into compliance through strategic enforcement. She directed other board members to fabricate violations, encouraged the targeting of my property, and even floated the idea of planting contraband in my yard to involve law enforcement. One email from Craig read, "If we can get him cited for something criminal, he'll lose community trust. People will beg us to intervene." The leak went public within hours. A local blogger got a hold of it and ran a full exposé on the Maple Ridge HOA. The headline read, "HOA Gone Wild, Suburban Dictatorship Exposed." The neighborhood turned overnight. Residents who'd once avoided eye contact now waved from their porches. One woman even brought over a pie and whispered, "I always hated Cheryl." At the next HOA meeting, the turnout was triple the usual. People packed into the community center, not to discuss lawn heights, but to demand resignations. Cheryl tried to maintain control, banging the gavel and calling for order. I stood near the back, arms folded, watching the storm she'd built finally collapse on her. "You've cost us thousands in legal fees," someone shouted. "You lied about the lien process," another yelled. "You tried to frame a neighbor." That one got a full round of applause. Cheryl tried to argue that I was a toxic element and that she had acted in the interest of the community. But nobody was buying it. One resident, a retired judge named Harold Becker, stood up and said, "The only toxic element here is the rot in your leadership. I move to dissolve the current board pending investigation." The vote wasn't even close. That night I got a call from Detective Ramirez. "She's being charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, filing false police reports, and coordinated vandalism. Craig and Linda are being charged as well. Might be more once the DA finishes digging." By the end of the month, Cheryl had vanished from the neighborhood. Her house went up for sale quietly, and the rest of the former board resigned under pressure. The new interim HOA president, Harold Becker, at the first meeting under his leadership, he addressed the crowd with a calm, clear voice. "We're here to serve the community, not control it. And we will never again weaponize this association against a homeowner." The room erupted in applause. I didn't join the HOA, I never planned to, but I didn't have to fight them alone. All it took was standing my ground long enough for the truth to come out, and a few well-placed cameras. One morning, about 3 weeks after Cheryl's resignation, I was sipping coffee on the back porch when a city inspector showed up unannounced. He was wearing a reflective vest and holding a clipboard, clearly annoyed. "I need to inspect your property lines," he said. "There's been a complaint about an illegal fence extension onto Greenbelt land." I didn't have a fence, not even a single post. I motioned toward the yard. "You're free to look, but I think you've got the wrong house." He squinted at the clipboard again, then frowned. "It says here there was a recent construction project violating city easement laws." I walked with him around the lot. Nothing but grass and a few flower beds. No fence, no construction, no changes since the day I moved in. He scratched his head, took a few photos, and apologized. "Someone's filing bogus complaints under your address. That's a felony if it's intentional." I didn't need to guess who it was. The timing was too perfect. The new HOA board was still reorganizing, and Cheryl had vanished without a trace, but her fingerprints were still all over this. She might have been gone, but someone was still running errands for her. Later that afternoon, Dean, my lawyer, forwarded a tip he'd received from a contact at City Hall. Apparently, multiple anonymous complaints had been submitted regarding my property sinkholes that didn't exist, illegal pesticide use, even a supposed unlicensed daycare operation in my basement. All of them were traced back to the same IP address. Dean met me at my house that evening. He had a folder in his hand and a look on his face like someone who just discovered termites in their floorboards. "They weren't just trying to fine you out of the neighborhood," he said. "They were laying the groundwork for a city condemnation process. If enough infractions stack up, it triggers a review. Someone wanted the city to seize your home." I stared at him. "That's not just harassment, that's criminal conspiracy," he nodded. "And I've already alerted the DA's office." That night, I added 2 more cameras, one facing the alley, the other angled at the rear fence line. I didn't care if it looked paranoid. If someone was still acting on Cheryl's behalf, I wanted to catch them in the act. It didn't take long. 3 nights later, at just after 3 in the morning, a figure in a hoodie and gloves crept through the alley with a can of industrial weed killer. They leaned over the back fence and sprayed a thick line across my vegetable garden, then disappeared into the dark. The camera caught everything, from the license plate of the getaway car to the design on the hoodie sleeve. Dean forwarded the footage to Detective Ramirez, who called me the next day. "We got an ID," Ramirez said. "It's Cheryl's nephew, lives 2 towns over. Already has a misdemeanor for trespassing on his record." He paused for a moment before continuing. "Walter, there's more. We served a warrant on Cheryl's old residence. Her home computer had spreadsheets tracking fines, fake complaints, and notes about which city inspectors could be manipulated. There's even a draft lawsuit naming you as a public nuisance. She was building a case to have your property seized and auctioned under eminent domain. I sat down hard, the air punched out of my lungs. Ramirez continued. She wasn't just trying to control the HOA, she wanted your land. There's a note in one of the files about a developer looking to acquire multiple lots for a commercial project. Your house was the last one not under HOA jurisdiction. That changed everything. Dean filed a motion to expand our civil suit to include attempted fraud through misuse of municipal systems. Meanwhile, Cheryl's nephew was arrested and charged with felony property damage. When questioned, he admitted Cheryl had paid him $200 to mess up the yard a little and keep the pressure on. The DA's office moved quickly. They filed criminal charges against Cheryl for conspiracy, cyber harassment, and attempted misuse of city condemnation procedures. When officers tried to arrest her, she was already gone. Her Lexus was found abandoned at a regional airport, and she'd boarded a flight 2 days before the warrant dropped. She had used a fake name. It took another week before the U.S. Marshals tracked her to a rental property in Nevada. She'd been living under her maiden name and using a forged ID. They brought her back in cuffs. The trial became a local spectacle. For the first time, people saw just how deep the corruption had gone. Cheryl had used her position to fabricate violations, manipulate city officials, and even bribe an HOA accountant to backdate bogus fines against multiple residents, not just me. A woman named Samantha, who lived 3 blocks over, came forward with her own story. Cheryl had forced her to repaint her entire home 3 shades lighter under threat of foreclosure, even though the shade was within code. Another man, Henry, admitted he'd paid nearly $6,000 in fines just to avoid confrontation. At the trial, Cheryl tried to claim it was all a misunderstanding, that she was trying to restore order and protect property values. But the jury wasn't buying it. Her emails showed a clear intent to target, harass, and ultimately drive me out for financial gain. She was convicted on all counts. The judge handed down a sentence of 7 years, with no possibility of parole for the first 3. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of her lawyer packing up papers. After the verdict, I stepped outside into the cold air and took a deep breath. Dean clapped me on the shoulder. "You just set a precedent," he said. "No HOA in this county is going to try something like that again." The new board, under Judge Becker's guidance, began rewriting the HOA charter. Gone were the vague clauses about community harmony and aesthetic values. In their place were clear, enforceable rules with limits on fines, mandatory review panels, and strict oversight of board actions. The board also voted to establish an independent ombudsman position, a rotating community member with no ties to the board, responsible for reviewing complaints and ensuring accountability. I wasn't interested in the role, but I nominated Samantha. She accepted. As for me, I finally finished planting the vegetable garden Cheryl's nephew tried to destroy. Tomatoes, squash, and peppers now filled the raised beds. The fence stayed low, the cameras stayed up, and the neighborhood stayed quiet. Neighbors stopped by more often now. Not to complain or take photos, but to say hello, ask for gardening tips, or just talk. Whatever fear or tension Cheryl had planted was gone, replaced by something that felt a lot more like community. I never joined the HOA, never planned to, but I didn't have to bend to live here. All I had to do was stand my ground long enough for the truth to do the rest. I was halfway through repairing the irrigation line behind the garden when Harold Becker pulled up in his old Buick. He stepped out slowly, adjusting his cap against the late afternoon sun, and held up a manila envelope like it was something dangerous. "Walter," he said, "you need to see this." I wiped my hands on a rag and nodded toward the porch. "What is it?" He followed me up the steps with a stiffness that only came from long years on the bench. Once we sat, he handed me the envelope. Inside were scanned copies of real estate contracts, county assessor reports, and a memo from a law office I didn't recognize. But the name at the top of each document hit like a brick. Maple Ridge Development Group. I looked at Harold. "That's not real, is it?" he sighed. "It is. Cheryl wasn't just trying to push you out. She signed a preliminary agreement with that group 2 years ago. The plan was to get the HOA to take over the entire cul-de-sac, then rezone it for mid-rise condos. But you were the last holdout. Without your lot, the project couldn't move forward. That's why she went after you." I flipped through the papers again. "This law firm Caldwell and Lorne, why does that sound familiar?" Harold leaned forward. "Because the lead partner, Raymond Lorne, is her cousin. She hid it pretty well, but the money trail leads straight back to her." I stood up slowly, pacing the edge of the porch. "So she tried to get my property condemned so she could sell it to her cousin's firm under the table?" Harold nodded. "And here's the worst part. The HOA had an emergency fund about $20,000. It was supposed to be for infrastructure repairs. Cheryl drained it in chunks. Legal retainers, consultant fees, all filtered through fake invoices. I only found out because the new treasurer flagged the math. So she embezzled from the HOA to fund a private land grab," I said. "And now that she's in custody, the county's opening a full audit. If anyone else was involved, we'll know." I didn't say anything for a moment. I just looked out at the yard, the garden rows, the freshly trimmed trees. A whole neighborhood had nearly been reshaped around one woman's greed. Harold stood. "There's going to be a community meeting next week. I think you should come." "I'll be there," I said. That night, I went through the documents again. My lawyer, Dean, confirmed every single one was authentic. The development group had even filed a zoning variance request 6 months earlier, banking on the HOA acquiring my property by then. They were so confident they'd already submitted architectural plans to the city. But none of it could move forward now. Not with Cheryl indicted and the HOA under investigation. The following Thursday, I got a call from Detective Ramirez. "We've charged Cheryl with financial fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy to defraud the county. But there's a new wrinkle. One of the city planning officials was on her payroll. We found cash deposits into his offshore account. He was going to fast-track the rezoning request once she delivered your lot." I didn't say anything. Ramirez continued. "That's public corruption, and the DA wants to make an example out of all of them." On Tuesday, the community meeting was packed. Not just residents, but reporters and a representative from the mayor's office. Harold stood at the front beside a projector screen. When I walked in, every head turned. I took a seat near the back, not saying a word. Harold cleared his throat. "Thank you all for coming. I know recent events have shaken our trust in this institution, but transparency starts tonight. We're going to walk through exactly what happened, who knew what, and when." Over the next hour, he laid out the full timeline, the secret contracts, the financial discrepancies. The emails between Cheryl and the developer, including one where she referred to me as the final domino. Then he brought up the city official Dennis Hackett, a man who had rubber-stamped dozens of permits over the past decade. He was being charged with accepting bribes from at least 3 neighborhood associations, including Maple Ridge. When Harold asked if anyone had questions, a woman in the front row raised her hand. "What's going to happen to our dues?" she asked. "To the HOA itself," Harold nodded. "We're freezing dues until a full audit is complete, and we're holding elections next month for a permanent board. No more lifetime appointments, no more backdoor decisions." Another man stood up, Thomas, a contractor 2 houses down from me. "And what about Walter? He's the reason this all came out." "The reason we caught it in time." Harold looked my way. "That's up to him. I didn't need to. I just want to live in peace," I said. "No fake fines, no bogus flags, just neighbors, not overseers." There was a long silence, then someone clapped, then another. Within seconds, the room filled with applause, not loud or dramatic, but solid. Genuine. After the meeting, Thomas approached me in the parking lot. "I got a crew," he said. "We're rebuilding the community garden Cheryl bulldozed last year for that pointless gazebo. You're welcome to plant whatever you want." I shook his hand. "Count me in." A week later, I got a certified letter from the DA's office. As part of Cheryl's sentencing agreement, she was required to pay restitution to affected residents. My name was at the top of the list. I wouldn't see all of it, not even most, but the gesture mattered. The city also announced a new oversight committee for neighborhood associations. Harold was appointed as a founding member. He called me the next day. "Would have never happened without your cameras," he said. I laughed. Guess they finally paid for themselves. Cheryl took a plea deal. 5 years plus restitution and a lifetime ban from serving on any homeowners association board in the state. Her cousin, the lawyer, had his license suspended. The city official resigned in disgrace and was awaiting trial. I replaced the old mailbox with a steel one bolted to a concrete base. Not out of paranoia, just practicality. The cameras stayed up, but I didn't check them as often. Neighbors came and went, but the tension was gone. People waved. Kids played basketball in the street without someone measuring decibel levels. And the new board made good on their promise. Every new policy was voted on, every dollar accounted for. As for me, I finally got around to building that rain barrel system I'd been meaning to try. The garden thrived. Tomatoes the size of softballs, peppers so hot they made your ears ring. I even gave away extra produce on Saturdays, left it out in a box near the sidewalk with a handwritten sign. "Take what you need." One afternoon, a boy about 10 years old stopped by with his mom. He picked out a cucumber the size of his forearm and looked up at me, eyes wide. "Did you grow all this?" "Every bit of it," I said. He nodded like that meant something. "Cool." They walked off down the street. The mom glanced back and gave me a quiet nod of thanks. I watched them go, then turned back to the garden. The sun was warm, the breeze steady, and for the first time in months, everything felt exactly the way it should. No HOA flags, no clipboards, just soil, sweat, and peace.